Well, hello everyone. I'm gonna go over really quickly on what your goals should be at day one when gearing a character, and what defenses and what stats you should be prioritizing. Really quick. We're waiting for the game to be up since there's so many people logging in. So I thought it would be a good idea to make like a quick, like a quick look at how resistances can work. We're gonna use the Sentinel as an example, since it's a pretty standard class. Doesn't really have any crazy mechanics or anything like that. So you guys can get an idea of what you should be doing. All right. So the first thing you gotta recognize is that you can get the first thing you gotta be aiming for is capping your resistances. You can see right now our resistances are really obviously we don't have any resistances. Now you're gonna be able to get some resistances from your passives. For example, the Sentinel gets a lot of Void resistance, the Mage gets a lot of Elemental resistance, Rogue gets some Poison resistance, Lich, Acolyte gets a lot of Necrotic resistance, Primalist gets a bit of everything. So depending on your class, obviously, you're gonna get some shit for free, and you should take advantage of it. You know, if your class has like some free resistances, obviously you wanna take them, especially when you're leveling. One thing that you gotta be aware is that a lot of the good bases have like a minimum level requirement. For example, for the best amulet for resistances, Bone Amulet, you have to be level 58. So if you don't have this kind of like, if you're not level 58 yet, obviously you can access these bases. So until you can access the good bases, I wouldn't worry too much on your bases on the armor. But make sure that when you reach these key levels, like level 58 for bone armor, like gold rings at level 20, I think it is, 25, like make sure you try to grab them. Gold rings are really insane, especially early on, if you roll them properly. You can see just by using 2 gold rings or resistances, we're gonna assume we're max rolling, right? Just so you get an idea. We're getting almost 35% elemental resistances literally for free. Really good. And again, you can get these rings literally like 1 hour into the game, so when you're level 25 or whatever. So you should obviously try to aim for this. Really good. Another way to get resistances also would be from some of the early gloves. For example, you have the necrotic gloves. I think they're these ones, the outclass gloves. You can get some necrotic resistance, and again they're level 25. Boom, you get them, some free necrotic resistance. Really good. And you can also get some resistances from some of the boots later on, like Herborian.
Wonderful.
You get some cold resistance, and just like with some basic crap gear, you can see like your resistances are rising up quite a bit. But again, while you're leveling, you wanna be basically full stacking resistances on your important pieces of gear. For example, right now, with this gear that we're wearing at level like 40 or whatever, let's just assume we're only level 30, right? So we have level 20 bases, right? And our resistances are looking okay. And some of them, poison is not that important. We have some necrotic, that's good. We have some elemental, but we don't have any physical. Well, if you have a chest piece, you get some fizz resistance. Make sure you have a tier 5, really easy to get. Just literally, that's all you need in the armor. Boom, you have your physical resistance. And you can do the same, for example, with your belt. You can get some void resistance, right? Void resistance here. Let's just say you want to get movement speed on your boots always, so focus on that on the boots. And then you can get some extra necrotic resistance on your gloves. Remember, you're getting a lot of necrotic resistance for free. And then on your relic, you can get whatever you're missing. You know, what are we missing? We're missing some void resistance and some elemental. Let's just say you're gonna get some elemental resistance on your relic, and you're gonna get some void resistance on your amulet. And you could get even a bit more LR resistance on your helmet. And you can see just with a single tier on every item, you're basically capped on all resistances. Now, it is important that you kind of like approach resistances with this bulk mentality, where one item is covering you like a single stat. because this is gonna make it for you to replace stats way easier. For example, the next stat that you wanna get, like around level 50, sorry, is you wanna get crit avoidance capped. Crit avoidance is really important because it makes it so you can get crit if you have 100% crit avoidance. Crits do double damage in this game for enemies. So obviously, if you're playing hardcore, stuff like that, crit avoidance is absolutely mandatory for pretty much every build. And the easiest way to get crit avoidance is by defeating the Abomination boss at the Monolith of Faith. And you get Woven Flesh. It's like a 90% drop, and it will give you 100% crit avoidance. Now, obviously, we had our physical resistance on our chest piece. So even though we got the crit avoidance, we lost our physical resistance. But that means, as you guys know, we had 3 slots on the rings. So again, you could just have you could just focus on physical resistance on your rings instead, right? And now but you guys see how easy it was to do this transition from using a chest piece with resistances to choose to change to Woven Flesh. Make sure your items, when you're leveling and stuff, your items have one function. Don't try to get like 20 stats on an item. Get an item up with the stat that you want, and if you can get anything on top, you know, imagine you're doing a crit build and you get like a bit of crit on top of it because it dropped like it, and you get like a bit of attack speed or whatever, like a tier 1 attack speed or whatever. Sure, you know, nice. But all of these are extras, that it's not your goal. Your goal is to get the tier 5 necrotic resistance. So this would be literally this is like 2 hours into a character, killing Abomination 3 hours into a character. You get your resistance is pretty covered, you get your crit avoidance covered, and you're gonna be around this time, you're gonna be around level 50, because that's the level you can equip Woven Flesh. And around level 50 is when you're gonna start unlocking the good bases. By good bases, I mean, for example, at level 58, you get Bone Amulet. Bone Amulet has a shit ton of physical resistance, a shit ton of necrotic resistance. And what this means is, obviously right now we're overcapped on physical resistance, which means we don't need this ring anymore, right? We don't need this ring anymore, and we don't need these gloves anymore. Which means we can move to, for example, Crusader gauntlets later on, engraved gauntlets from Sword Endurance. Eventually, you most of the time want Crusader gauntlets for the implicit void resistance. But you can see right now, like, obviously our void is super busted right now. Well, it means we don't need void here anymore, because we're just getting it on the gloves. And basically, you kind of like, thanks to the implicits of the items, you're gonna be able to free up a lot of slots in your gear. For example, since or void, like, once you get these void gloves, I highly recommend just going void defense. Like, you go void defense on these bad boys, boom, and a single item is gonna cap your void resistance, right? Again, you have Bone Amulet right here. You get necrotic resistance on your Bone Amulet. Boom. A single item is gonna cap your necrotic resistance. A single item is gonna cap your void resistance, and you just gotta work on the other resistances now. Again, remember, we're getting 40% physical res, and so we only need to build physical rest on one other suffix, which is really, really handy. So at this point, we're basically capped on resistance, and what we want to do is we want to make sure we make room for other stats. As we're going to be leveling up, we're going to be unlocking better bases. For example, eventually we're going to get Solarum Graves, right, at level 60 or whatever. This comes with fire resistance. And for example, on the Sentinel, you can pair it up with this beautiful, what is it? I think is Solarum Banner. Nope. Legend Crest. This one at level 58, 45 cold resistance, 45 lightning resistance, which means that with this and just gold rings, right, you can get rid of the elemental resistances in it. Or your elemental resistances are capped without building a single elemental resistance, right? Because we have elemental resistance implicit, elemental resistance implicit, fire resistance implicit, and then the other two elemental resistance implicit. Which obviously this will allow us to build whatever the fuck we want on these items, because we don't need to focus on defense anymore. So again, you could go HP, you could go strength, you can go crit, whatever the fuck you're building, you know, and you can try to get some fancy rings for whatever you want, you know, called whatever you're doing with your build, right? Same for the relic, you know, you could go like you could try to get like a class specific thing. If you're doing hammer throws, you make sure you get that. But you're kind of still having that mentality of one item does one thing. As you can see right now, my resistances are capped, but my items only need like a single stat on them to be efficient. Obviously on the helmet you could use luxury stuff like cooldown reduction, class specific stuff, whatever you want. You could get a better belt, obviously, with some extra potions, with some armor, and get some you know, you could get some increased HP, etc, etc, right? And again, you can see like we're building our character and every item is doing just one thing, right? This is the void resistance, this is our necro resistance with fizz, this ring is just giving us some fizz resistance plus the implicit, this item is just the implicit, this item is just movement speed, this item is LR resistance with the fire resistance, and this item is crit avoidance. Now the next step, for example for a sentinel, would be to try to transition out of woven flesh. How do you do that? Obviously you need to get your crit avoidance from a different source. Ways to get crit avoidance: for example, you can see these boots, they don't have any stat. Well, you can just get your crit avoidance here, right? You can get your crit avoidance, and again, since we mentioned this ring is not really doing anything for us, we could get a crit avoidance here, right? Where's the crit avoidance? Crit avoidance, and then we could get, I don't know, we could just, you know, access to one of the higher tier items that comes with crit avoidance, and boom, right now our crit avoidance is capped, so we can get rid of this and use whatever we want. Sentinel is pretty good because it has base crit avoidance on some items, so obviously you wouldn't need as much crit avoidance on other items, so you wouldn't need to use this, for example, and this ring is completely free to do whatever you want. And just like that, you know, you're capped on crit avoidance, and now you can start building some big dick, for example, HP with like class specific, you know, whatever you're doing with your class, throwing attack, shield throw, whatever, you know, and vitality even. And this would be kind of like your end game goals when you're building a character. But obviously, the better your items are, the more stats you're gonna be able to add to them. For example, at the beginning, the only thing you want on your gloves is void resistance, right? For example. But obviously, if these gloves, you're gonna be able to get these gloves as soon as you reach level 60. You gamble, you craft void resistance, boom, you got them. But obviously, as you find gear, what you wanna do is you wanna be able to keep those main stats while also adding more stats. And instead of having like one stat per item, I would go for 2 stats per item. For example, now this item is giving me void resistance and melee attack speed, right? And again, if you can get other stuff, it's great. For example, your rings are not doing anything, right? Why don't you go for endurance? So you raise your endurance mitigation. Again, you can do the same for, we don't really need this, as we mentioned. We can just go for endurance, right? And your relic doesn't have anything, well, or is doing the class thing, you could add your endurance. And just like that, you know, your endurance is gonna be capped at 60%, and you're gonna be having, and your HP is gonna be going up. And this is basically what you wanna be doing on a character like day 1, day 2. This is like kind of the stage. Obviously, you're not gonna get a chest piece this good, but you could aim for something like this, day 2. And for this, you could, instead of going for cooldown, you can go for literally just HP, right? And you're gonna see that at day 2 of a character, you know, you're gonna have your like 1,500 HP, 2,000 HP. You're gonna cap all of your resistances, and you're gonna have room to build luxury stuff on your rings, on your gloves, on your boots. Or boots don't have anything, right? Only crit avoidance. And that's kind of like basically how you prepare your defenses. And I hope you guys enjoyed it, and bye bye.